This took place when I was 18. Now, at 22, I still live in San Antonio, Texas. During my senior year of high school, COVID had just started spreading rapidly, and as a result, everything began shutting down, including my school. Even though we were all supposed to stay home in quarantine, my friends and I were going out more than ever. With non-essential businesses closed, there wasn't much to do. But if there's one thing about me, it's that I love urban exploring, especially haunted locations. And to this day, that hasn't changed. I don't scare easily. I've had run-ins with the homeless, stumbled upon cult gatherings, and even had a gun pointed at me. But none of that compared to the eerie and unsettling experience I encountered that night. Moving forward, around this time, I started talking to a girl who I had a class with in high school. Her name was Clarissa. If it weren't for her matching my alibi of what happened this night, I'm sure none of my friends would have believed me. We were still kind of freshly dating, but I somehow convinced her to explore a wooded natural park at 3 a.m. here in San Antonio. The park is called Opie Schnabel. It's relatively nice, safe, and very scenic during the day. But at night, it can be a dangerous place, and police usually roam the entrances to the area at night, keeping people away. In 2016, a 24-year-old woman named Lauren Bump was brutally murdered and stabbed over 20 times. And in 2021, a boy exploring the woods was shot. Clarissa and I get to the park around 3 a.m. It's super creepy and pitch black. The trees do a really good job at covering the moonlight. I don't like to have my flashlight on, because then my eyes can't adjust to the darkness, and you can really only see what's lit up from the light. Plus, I wouldn't want someone to see my light from a far distance, so I like to keep them off while exploring. We were probably about 15 to 20 minutes in walking the main trail. I didn't plan to be in there for too long because it was kind of creepy and oddly quiet that night. I knew a trail that goes off the road that leads back to where my truck was parked. I told her we could take that trail, essentially making a full circle instead of walking all the way back around. She agreed, and so we began walking through that off-road trail. We were probably only about 2 minutes into the off-road trail when suddenly, out of nowhere, a flute began playing. Clarissa and I stopped dead in our tracks and looked at each other, just listening. Whoever was playing it, it was super in cadence, and sounded like it was playing some sort of piece of music. However, there was no time for me to process that it may have sounded good. It was creepy as fuck, as I said before. I don't scare easily, but 15 seconds into the flute solo, Clarissa began trembling in fear, and on the brink of crying. I was kind of just listening. But when Clarissa started praying to God to save her and forgive her for her sins, that's when I realized the severity of the situation. To be clear, it was super hard to pinpoint where the sound of the flute was coming from. It sounded like it was coming from the direction of the previous main trail, which was parallel to where we were, with about maybe 30 to 50 yards of woods in between. But it was getting louder and closer to the point where it sounded like the sound was right on top of us. Clarissa couldn't even focus because she was so scared. So I knew I had to man up and get us out of this situation. This is going to sound corny, but I told her, don't worry, I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I told her that we should run down the off-road trail to get away. So we did. We began to sprint. I believe the flute stopped playing, But it was hard to notice because I was more focused on getting the hell out of there. We only got about 30 feet when out of nowhere we heard the rustling of bushes and the snapping of leaves and twigs before something big dashed across the trail right in front of us. Now this could have very well been a deer or some sort of bigger wildlife. But it was so strange because I could almost feel the size of whatever was in front of us. I don't know if it was from the wind or what. The only thing is, I never saw a silhouette or shape of anything in front of us. Another strange thing is, I didn't hear it coming, and I didn't hear it run away. I only heard the dash right when it was right in front of us. As soon as we felt and heard whatever dashed across the trail right in front of us, we obviously turned back around and bolted in the other direction until we got back to the original point where we heard the flute. And then, as if whoever was playing it was waiting for us to return, the flute started to play again, loud and right on top of us. This time, it was almost chiming. It sounded like it belonged to some sort of Irish jig song or something, but the chiming was still in cadence. However, it was still impossible to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. It was just surrounding us. At this point, my fight or flight instincts kicked in because we were trapped. We had two options. Either go back into the off-road trail, where we heard that terrifying dash right in front of us, or go back to the main trail, where the flute and whatever psychopath was playing it was at. The off-road trail was definitely scarier because it was darker and surrounded by more dense forest, and at least the main trail was a cement path. Thus I told Clarissa, who was still trembling in fear. Let's start running down the main trail back to the truck. We ran back. Adrenaline was still pumping, so we cut the 20-minute walk into a 7 to 8-minute jog. And somewhere along the run, the flute noise must have stopped. Along the run back, there was a random porta potty, and I was scared to death because what if someone was on the other side or hiding inside of it? Because it seemed to be somewhat parallel to where we were at earlier. Thankfully, I didn't see anyone, or signs of anyone ever having been there. In fact, my truck was the only vehicle in the area near the main entrance to the woods. We made it to the truck, and I sped far away from there. The next day, I told all my friends about it, and I looked all over the internet to see if anyone's ever come across anything like this. People claim to run into ghosts, cults, animals making terrifying noises, but a soft and rhythmic flute solo. I couldn't find anything on that. Or maybe I just didn't look hard enough. I tried to figure out all the possibilities. There are some houses that eventually led into a neighborhood on the far edge of the woods, but those houses are at least a couple miles away. And we were fairly deep into the woods, so there's no way the sound could have traveled that far, because I'm telling you, the flute was clear as day, and it was 3 a.m. Obviously, I never found out who was playing that flute, or what dashed right in front of us. I actually kind of got chills writing the story. The more I think about it, it actually seems more paranormal rather than something scary on a tangible level. I don't know if it was a person, ghost, cult, or what. I'm really hoping someone might have a rational explanation. Either way, I never really went back to those woods at night. I still explore plenty of creepy places, but never really came across anything like that ever again. I'm a 20-year-old guy. I work at a medium-sized hospital in northwest Alabama as a pharmacy technician. I work an early night shift, 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. I'm also in charge of stocking the surgery rooms. I work for 7 days in a row, and then I have 7 days off. Working the 7 sucks, but the 7 off feels amazing. I work Thursday through Wednesday, and on my 6th night, working a Tuesday, I left a little early to go stay with my wife at her aunt's house, about 30 minutes away from our house. She was babysitting her little cousins while her aunt and uncle were on a trip. The house didn't have any curtains, so she felt uneasy for the few nights she was there. I didn't go with her at first because it was during my work week, and she told me there was really no point if I was going to get there around 5 a.m. and then go to sleep once the sun started to rise. But on her last night babysitting, she felt extremely anxious, so I told her I was coming over. She is stubborn, but she thanked me and felt so much better once I arrived. Working the night shift for the last 2 years has really taken a toll on me mentally, and I think I've started to develop some slight insomnia. I literally could not go to sleep after getting to my wife's aunt's house. This isn't anything new, but I had never stayed up for more than about 28 hours before. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't sleep because we had a really big day ahead of us. We had to drop her little cousins off at school. Our friend was having a gender reveal party. We had to go shopping because we had no groceries at home since she had been away for the last 3 days, and I had to be at work at 6 p.m. I ended up falling asleep in the car for a little less than 10 minutes. I was really feeling that wave of sleepiness come over me, but I ended up getting a huge Red Bull and another energy drink once I got to work. I had my wife drive me to work and pick me up since my brakes needed to be changed, and I wasn't driving my car. And also because neither of us trusted myself to drive her car on over 24 hours of no sleep. It was Wednesday night now, and I had been awake since about 2 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. My shift started out fine. If I kept myself occupied, the exhaustion wouldn't hit me as hard. With my earbuds in, I listened to music while restocking the surgery rooms with their medications. Since it was a weeknight, a few late surgeries were still wrapping up, and the housekeeping staff was busy cleaning the operating rooms that had been in use. It wasn't unusual for surgical staff to step into the room I was in to grab supplies if they ran out of something. Whenever that happened, I'd typically turn around, offer a quick smile, and they'd do the same in return. I was in my own little world, stocking the Omnicell machine with meds and listening to music when I heard the door behind me open. There was that distinct high-pitched squeal when a door needs its hinges to be oiled. It made the loud crash that heavy wooden doors make when they shut, so I turned around to see who it was like always, except there was no one there. I didn't really get worried about it. Maybe they opened the door and saw I was in there and just decided to go to another room, so I continued on. As I pushed my cart to the next room, the light in this room was off. I opened the door, and I swear I saw someone hunched over by the Omnicell machine, digging through the sharps bin. If you don't know what that is, it's a bin where you dispose of needles and vials after use, instead of just putting them in a normal garbage can. Someone had already been caught doing this before in search of morphine, and consequently was fired. I turned on the light and was going to ask what they were doing, but when I turned the light on, there was no one there. Okay, now I was starting to get a little creeped out. I didn't know the time frame of when you could start hallucinating after not sleeping for over 24 hours. So I just told myself I was probably seeing things and needed to just calm down. After finishing up restocking the surgery rooms without any other incidents, I made my way back to the pharmacy. Every night at 2 a.m., we're required to deliver patient-specific medications to the nurse's station. To give an idea of how the floors are structured, I'll use the 5th floor as an example. Each floor number directly corresponds to its level in the building. At the center of the floor, there are 3 elevators. When you step out, turning left leads to the 5,100 and 5,200 sections, while going right takes you to the 5,400 and 5,500 sections. Each side consists of 2 wings. So there are patient rooms numbered 510, 5 to 5115. And the other wing has rooms 5201 to 5215. Each floor is laid out the exact same way, so each wing has 15 rooms on each side. To shorten the floor names, though, I'm going to refer to them as 5152 and 5455. Recently, the 5th floor, specifically the 5455 side, had been undergoing some remodeling. So our overflow floor, the 3rd floor, was where they put the patients who were on the 54/55 side of the 5th floor while they remodeled. The 54/55 side was empty because there weren't that many people in the hospital that night. I made my way up the hospital, delivering meds to the nurses stationed floor by floor until I got to the 5th floor. I went to the 51/52 side, delivered the meds, and decided to go check out the progress of the 54/55 side. As I went over there, I just got creeped out. There were no nurses, no patients, just the long, empty hallways. The surgery rooms are already empty and desolate most nights, so I'm used to walking around down there, no problem. But seeing empty patient rooms just creeped me out. I walked slowly down the 55 side. I heard a noise that sounded like one of the hospital beds rattling. As I passed 5512, I quickly found out what the noise was. As I looked into the rooms, I saw an old man violently shaking as if he was having a seizure. Blood was running down his eyes, nose, and out of his mouth. He was making this gargling, groaning sound, almost like the sounds the zombies in The Walking Dead make. A monitor was frantically beeping, like it does when a patient is coding. My heart dropped when I saw this, and I took a quick step behind the doorframe. I immediately stepped back into the room as I realized this man was in desperate need of medical attention. But when I looked back in there was no man. This bed was clean and made, the monitor was off, and there were no signs that anyone had even been in that room for at least a whole day. I thought, at that point, I was for sure hallucinating. I quickly made my way back over to the elevators, and I made my way back down to the 1st floor where the pharmacy is. As the elevator doors opened, an old man in a security shirt and hospital badge got on the elevator. He patted my shoulder as he walked past me. It was that same man I had seen moments before having a seizure and making those zombie-like noises. He smiled at me as the doors closed, and I watched the numbers on the elevator go all the way up to the 5th floor. I didn't push the button for the elevator to come back down, but the same elevator came back down to the 1st floor and opened. There was no one on the elevator. I hurried back to the pharmacy and sank into a chair, staying there for the rest of my shift until my wife arrived to pick me up. As I waited, I decided to Google how long it takes for sleep deprivation to cause hallucinations. The answer was between 30 and 48 hours, and since I was on hour 38 with no sleep, it made sense. The pharmacy sits directly beneath the 5455 section, so whenever I walk in, I can see the windows at the far end of the hospital wing on the 24, 34, 44, and 54 sides. Sometimes, while waiting for the elevator on that side to take me back down, I glance out the window. As I was heading out to my wife's car that night, I happened to look back up at the 5th floor window, and there he was. The same old man staring at me through the glass. A chill ran through me as I got into the car. I never mentioned what I saw that night. I don't know why I would have hallucinated that particular man. He wasn't familiar to me, and even if I had seen him before, he held no significance in my life. Even now, I'm unsure if it was truly a hallucination, or if I actually saw something that night. It felt real. The moment I got home, I went straight to sleep. I haven't seen that man again, but this only happened less than 2 weeks ago. But first, did you know that 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed? That means you. And yes, I am speaking specifically to you. Probably aren't. So now would be a great time to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Anyhow, I live with my boyfriend and his house that he owns. It's a modest house in a good neighborhood. Violent crime here is typically low. I say it's a modest house because compared to the other houses in the neighborhood, it's on the smaller side. But having a smaller house in this neighborhood is still very desirable because it allows us to still live in a nice town without owning a multi-million-dollar home. It's a single floor, 3-bed, and 2-bathroom house with a basement. We're on a very quiet block with a lot of privacy. The way the street curves provides this optimal privacy, as when we step outside of the house, there's not a single neighboring house directly facing us. There are 8 houses total on our block. Further down the block is a small wooded area. My boyfriend Mika was away one weekend in Vegas for a bachelor party last October. I was alone from Thursday to Monday. Friday after work, I had some of my girls over for a wine night. At some point, while we were in the living room watching scary movies, the doorbell rang. We all went quiet and looked at one another with the same faces. The doorbell ringing late at night while watching a scary movie almost felt not real. I went to go sneakily see if I could see who was outside on the porch, but I couldn't get a view from the window. There is a tiny glass panel at the top of the door, so I peeked through it. There were like 4 cars in the driveway. They had to know people were home, but I didn't see anyone on the porch. I went back to my friends, and while we all agreed that was weird, we accepted that it was just a very unfortunately timed ding-dong ditch. After everyone left, it was late enough for me to go to bed and fall asleep right away. But I was awoken that night, not even an hour later, to the doorbell ringing twice. I looked at my phone, and it was like 1 a.m. No one belongs outside your door at this hour. I immediately called Mika, and he picked up sounding really drunk in a loud bar. He had to go to a bathroom to be able to hear me. Once he heard me, he told me to just stay in the bedroom and not open the door to anyone. He never once suggested calling the police, so I refrained from doing that for now. We ended our call, and I tried to just stay calm and go back to sleep. Just as my heart rate started to slow and I started to calm down, I heard something from outside. some kind of clicking sounds until there was a knock at my window, and a male's voice said, "Hey, anyone home? I need some help out here." I thanked the Lord. The blinds were closed. I couldn't see who was out there, and they couldn't see me. Instead of leaving, he knocked again on the window. He said, "I know you're home." This was what prompted me to call the police. I never heard the man outside walk away from the window. For all I knew, he was still standing outside of it. So I whispered the entire time, while on the phone, reporting someone trying to break into my house. Call me dramatic or an embellisher, but I was scared and I wanted the police here ASAP. Within 5 to 10 minutes, the doorbell rang again, followed by loud knocks. I went out and approached the front door and asked who it is. A male's voice said it's the police. It was a different voice from the other guy. I looked through the glass and confirmed it was a couple police officers. I opened the door for them, and right off the bat, the taller officer in front walked right into my house without my even inviting him in. He said they were responding to my report of a disturbance, and I said there's a man lurking around the house, ringing the bell and knocking on my window. I don't want to make a big part of my recounting this story about this particular police officer, but he was the rudest man I'd ever met. I felt like he was on a power trip. He was demeaning towards me, telling me to shush and talking over me while I was trying to explain. He also didn't seem to take my claims very seriously. His partner didn't say a word. He just stood in the back. The taller one asked me details that I'd already made clear I wouldn't have, such as what the man looked like, when I clearly stated that I hadn't seen him. And the officer actually said to me, "Well, you're the one who called us, ma'am. If you don't want our help, we can leave." I was taken aback completely. I'd never called the police before, and I never expected such a lack of professionalism. I apologized and said I'm just scared. It was around this time that the two officers walked around the house with their flashlights. They went full circle and then came back, but honestly, they didn't really check very thoroughly. I watched them through the windows. They came back to the door and told me there's nothing they can do if I don't have any cameras or proof of the man trying to commit any wrongdoing. The two cops then left. I didn't feel any better at all, besides the fact that maybe whoever that man was saw I call the police. I went back to bed, and thankfully the next time I woke up was to sunlight creeping in through the closed blinds. It was around 10 a.m. It was Saturday, and that night my friend was having a Halloween party that I was going to help set up for. During the day, I did a little grocery shopping, and while I was at it, picked up some things for the party. My costume was Velma from Scooby-Doo, and my friend throwing the party was Daphne. I got to her house around 6 p.m. The party started at 9, and it really picked up around 10:30. I was there pretty late, like I probably left her house a little after 1 a.m. I was good to drive, as I didn't really drink much, besides a few beers. When I got home, I immediately noticed a cool draft in the house. After setting my things down on the dining room table, I noticed a window open. I went to shut it, trying to remember why I would have opened it. I went to brush my teeth, but then when I came out from the bathroom, I noticed the basement door was wide open. I froze. This was when I started hearing this faint but consistent clicking sound. As I got closer to the basement stairs, I realized it was coming from down there. And then I got to the top of the stairs, and I looked down to the pitch-black basement, and the clicking suddenly stopped. A voice from below suddenly said, You're finally home." With that, I slammed the basement door shut and took my phone with me outside. I banged on the neighbor's door until he answered, and I chose to call the police in the safety of my neighbor's house. It was unfortunately the same two officers who returned to my house. My neighbor accompanied me as I went to speak with them this time, and I think that may have had some kind of impact on that taller cop's attitude. He wasn't as rude this time. He and his partner checked the house while my neighbor and I stood in the living room. Eventually, after their initial search, I showed them some of the spots I'd imagined someone could be hiding. I basically tore the entire house upside down, while also on the phone with my drunk boyfriend. When I was sure that no one was here anymore, I packed a bag to go stay with my sister until Mika came back. This time, I locked every window before leaving. The main takeaway lesson from my story is if you have windows that open wide enough for someone to crawl through, make sure they're always locked when they're closed. We still live in this house today. But for a few months, I refused to be alone in the house for extended periods. I still have PTSD from this, and sometimes I have nightmares in which I think I'm hearing knocks at the window, and then I wake up. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more amazing video. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. All right, that's it for today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.